All right. Hello, viewers of the Canada Files. Thank you for coming in for yet another interview. This time I am speaking with some organizers from the Canadian BDS Coalition, Bruce Katz, Karen Rodman, and Hanna, Kawas. All right. So could you each take a little time to introduce yourselves and tell the audience a bit?
Okay, I guess I'll start since you named me first. My name is Bruce Katz. I'm one of the founding members and current co-president of Palestinian and Jewish Unity, which is a Montreal-based pro-Palestinian solidarity organization. And our short name is PAJU. And PAJU is a member both of BDS Quebec and the Canadian Boycott Coalition. BDS Quebec is also a member of the Canadian Boycott Coalition.
All right, great. Karen, would you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Karen Rodman. I'm based in Toronto. I'm one of the co-founders of Just Peace Advocates, which is a not-for-profit organization and also is a member of the Canadian BDS Coalition. Have also been involved in organizing here in Toronto with various groups and yeah, have been kind of, as has Bruce and Hanna, been involved with really getting the coalition, the Canadian BDS Coalition going since 2016, about 4 years ago that we came together in this forum.
All right, great. And Hanna, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Hanna Kawas. I'm the chairperson of Canada-Palestine Association in Vancouver and also a member of BDS Vancouver Coast Salish Territory, which is a subcommittee of CPA, Canada-Palestine Association. And for people who want more information about our work and BDS work and our work in general, our website is cpavancouver.org.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. So first question I have, and so I read through your report and you've done some great work. I noticed, including the Toronto Raptors campaign, Bombardier, pressuring Celine Dion not to perform, and much, much more. But what I'm interested in right now is, what are some of the campaigns you're working on in 2020 that people should know about?
One that's very timely right now would be around usual dates related to whether they are from Palestine, or whether they're from Israel or not with any country at all. So right now, because we're in Ramadan, that is certainly one of the most immediate campaigns. And of course, every year we would be doing that. So that would be one. And we have many. So I'll just let Hanna and Bruce jump in and we can cover a few of the campaigns that we're involved in.
Yeah, basically we're continuing with our work, we still have all the campaigns on the ones we are been doing all along, from boycott Israeli wines to boycott Teva to boycott Air Canada to all the rest, HP and Teva, boycott Teva, pharmaceuticals. So we working on all those. It's a continuation. And I'd like to just give some background. Our work is important in its educational value. We don't do work to achieve victories, although there were some victories in the process. And our main objective is to educate the public of what's happening in Palestine and on the Palestinian people's struggle. And through these campaigns, I mean, we won some, although we, we did a campaign against BC, Ballot BC and Ballet BC, and we didn't achieve victory. They eventually went to Israel, but the educational value was immense. There were a petition that was signed by almost 1,200 people, which is not really a joke. And we continuing the work to educate the public, whether through BDS or through other activities.
And I think that at the present moment, probably one of the more important campaigns that Canadian BDS Coalition has undertaken is the petition be signed both by organizations and individuals against Canada's seeking a seat on the United Nations Security Council, temporary seat, which we feel is largely undeserved, both for the lack of political acumen on the part of the Trudeau government vis-a-vis the Palestinian rights and Israel's crushing occupation and apartheid system, which subjugates and has subjugated the Palestinians for the past 72 years. So in our campaign, we are asking organizations to sign on to a letter asking diplomats at the UN not to grant Canada a seat on the Security Council, but rather to consider first and foremost more adequate nations such as Ireland and Norway, which would be much more deserving of those seats on the UN Security Council.
All right. So actually, I had that right in mind, and I was going to ask, can you maybe go into a little bit more depth around actions and votes that Canada has taken specifically that led to this in terms of UN Security Council votes, endorsements of certain policy, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, I might just start also by saying sort of the broader focus onto Canadian government is really important, just because, the stance, for example, in regard to referring to Canada as an asset for Israel, as an example, and the letter that was sent to the International Criminal Court by Canada on February the 14th, saying that Canada would stand by Israel in regard to saying that there was no jurisdiction for taking the war crimes committed against the Palestinian people to the International Criminal Court. So we had 42 organizations join with the about 200 organizations in Canada, across the world. It was really that came from Palestine, but mainly Palestinian organizations, but 42 here in Canada and more that have signed on with the direct sign on to Canada. So, these kind of focuses, for holding accountability and really calling for sanctions until the occupation is ended, until apartheid is ended, until right of return is realized, is really the call. And so we do that under a number of campaigns, like from my organization, from Just Peace Advocates on Gaza 2020. So in regard to the United Nations security, Council Hanna his group did an amazing analysis related to the UN votes. So I'll turn it back over to him. But we've done some work here, and in this century, the 21st century, Ireland and Norway have not voted against Palestine, not even once at the UN. Not even once at the UN, where Canada has only voted twice to support Palestine in the last decade. So that kind of speaks for itself at a high level, right? And we just start doing that analysis so that we can have more detail to talk to that about.
Yeah. Canada's position being bad from day one, from the partition plan in 1947, but recently, we did analysis on the voting record, and again, it's on our website. The Liberal government under Trudeau did have exactly the same record as the Harper government that preceded it. So there is no really difference between the conservative and the liberal on the voting record at the UN, and we did analysis. It is on our website. People could check it out. They clearly also, there is on our website an article about how Canada wanna be an asset to Israel. This is by former Foreign Minister and now Deputy Minister Freeland. She said that in Israel that they aiming to get the seat to be an asset for Israel, not an asset for Canada, mind you. So it's clear, you know, where this woman loyalties are. Again, this is on our website. It's an article we published, I think, the end of last year.
Yeah, December, I think.
On the issue. December 30th. So if they, you could go to the website and check the December posts on it, and it's right there. Again, you know, the Canadian position is really, in essence, it's supporting and enabling Israeli war crimes, and as such, it is complicit really in these war crimes against the Palestinian people.
Okay, so could you guys basically go more into depth about the Israeli apartheid, especially during COVID-19? Basically, what actions has Israel been taking during this period?
Well, I might say that even just recently, there's been. It would appear that Israel is using the cover of the COVID-19 pandemic to increase its systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian population. For example, only just recently, there are increased house demolitions in Silwan, which is in East Jerusalem, and that appears to be part of a campaign to actually expel the Palestinians from East Jerusalem, which has been on the books for Israel for a number of years. They have destroyed several health clinics, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, and actually have just arrested some specialists, and they've even sent troops on the other side of the separation wall, which is supposedly for, you know, their security, and all the while claiming that they want to help the Palestinians during the pandemic. Well, you don't help the Palestinians by destroying clinics and arresting specialists so that they can't tend to the people. So very, very clearly, this is part and parcel of their campaign to make it the annexation of West Bank settlements in the Jordan Valley de facto. They don't even need the Trump plan to do it. They're doing it on the ground as of now.
Recently, United Nations officials in the West Bank, including the UN humanitarian assistant to the Palestinian, the coordinator, and also the head of UN Human Rights Office and the UNICEF special representative. They they issued a special report. I'll send it to you on the chat about the release of Palestinian children and how Israel should release them. And in it, they clearly state that Israel released many Israeli prisoners, but none of the Palestinian prisoners in a jail. So they asking basically, specifically to release the Palestinian child prisoners. And this is one subject. The other subject is it's worth noting that the Israeli government used the emergency laws. That's the government, not the Knesset, and they issued 37 new emergency laws just around this time of the coronavirus. In its history, the last 20 years, the Israeli government only issued 16 laws. And again, I'll send you the report. And in it, these laws include broadening the authority to make arrests, allowing the firing of pregnant women from their jobs, and cutting teachers' salary by 50%. These are some of the 37 laws. So again, they're using the coronavirus issue to clamp on Palestinian resistance and Palestinian rights inside Israel and in the West Bank. And again, I will send this link to you.
All right. So talking about resistance to Israel's actions, especially recently you saw in the news how basically British MPs were actually pushing for sanctions over new plans for West Bank annexations. And now there's a petition, actually, Karen Rodman, you wrote up. Can you talk a little bit more about that petition, which was actually introduced by Paul Manley of the Green Party?
Sure, thank you so much. Yeah, so I mean, we reached out to Paul for sponsoring that petition. It does call for the end of the blockade, and it does call, as we were already speaking about, for the alignment of Canada's vote on the at the UN in a way that would match the rest of the international community, instead of Canada always aligning itself with the US and Israel and a few rogue islands like the Marshall Islands. Yeah, so Paul, I mean, the Green Party, of course, actually their policy is quite robust. It includes all aspects of the BDS call. It includes strong statements around the International Criminal Court. However, on the actual practical purpose, the Green Party and the current leader has not stood behind their own policy, and in fact, even during the recent election, did not include that policy on the Green Party's platform. So when I started to work with Paul, I'll be quite upfront that I wrote the petition to mirror the Green policy, and so that did include sanctions. The motion, as it appeared, does not include sanctions, but we're very pleased with it, and it really it shows the interest, the appetite, the willingness, and the awareness of people to want to sign on and to speak loudly and clearly. There were over 500 signatures within the first day of that petition going up. So I leave it to Bruce and Hanna maybe to echo in there, but I mean, I do think this is a way of engaging people across the country to sign that petition. We're really thankful for Paul being ready to move that forward, and my sense is that it will speak. We really would like something as strong as the letter that came around the annexation from the UK politicians, but there may be other ways of doing that as well.
Yeah, so you're mentioning about, and so actually I was checking the signature now as the moment actually has 902 signatures.
Yeah. So
it's doing pretty well. But in terms of, let's say, federal politics, do you see any political parties or potentially political figures within those parties that would maybe be willing to embrace BDS on the federal level, or do you see that something that's more of a work in progress right now?
Yeah, so probably for Hanna to talk mainly about our I Vote Palestine campaign, and then also Bruce in terms of the work that BDS Quebec has done really well as a third party in Montreal over the years, would be a good way to answer that, because we certainly did put very concerted calls out to all the parties during the election. So Hanna's probably good to do that.
BDS Quebec is of real interest. Could you go ahead on that?
Yeah, we sent the questionnaire during the elections, and the only one that responded was the NDP, and their response is on our website and on the BDS Coalition website, the NDP response. So it was quite positive, you know, to the point where they endorsed all the three main demands of the BDS. Without saying that they're going to support the BDS. The three demands are, you know, return of the Palestinian refugees according to 194, the equality inside Israel, and they were very clear on that in their response, and the third one, ending the occupation. So these are the three demands of the BDS. I mean, BDS won't exist if these demands are implemented. But again, the NDP backtracked through its leader, Mr. Singh, and he went on a roundtable for the CIJA, and he backtracked on all of those and denounced the BDS, and you know, was terrible. We have two interviews with me on the website about his position. You know, just if you search for CIJA, you'll get the interviews. But it's really terrible, and obviously, to the NDP and most politicians, they don't have a sense of morality or sense of human rights when it comes to them getting elected or appeasing the interest groups. So clearly, you know, most of the main parties fit into this category. I'm hoping, though, that with the new leader for the Green Party, it might be different. I'm hoping, you know, although I never trusted politicians, to be frank with you, but again, we hoping for, you know, if it's wishful thinking, that's fine, but we hoping that the Green Party will take a good position, elect a good leader that really favors human rights and the environment rather than their own selfish interest and self-centered policies and self-centered egotistical you know, image.
Okay.
I think that there are individual members of parliament who do support the principle of Palestinian rights, Palestinian self-determination. But when push comes to shove, they are not the ones who have the forum from which to speak. You know, especially not in the parliamentary system where you have each party has its whip. Whenever push comes to shove, you can always expect federal parties, not simply federal parties, but even in provincial parties, they will always toe the line when it comes to the pressure that's exerted by organizations representing the ProIsrael Lobby in Canada. Hanna mentioned CIJA, which is the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. There's also the B'nai B'rith, and there are other groups as well. For example, to its absolute dishonor, for decades now, successive Canadian administrations, the Canadian Revenue Agency, has allowed the racist Jewish National Fund to collect the money as a charity while administering stolen land in Israel, which comes from destroyed villages, and yet we allow them to register as a charity in Canada. That's simply one aspect of an absolutely pervasive pandering to a particular lobby in Canada. And there's, if anything, the Trudeau government in certain aspects, been worse than the Harper government in terms of real position on Palestine, which goes exactly to the opposite of Canada's official policy, such as it's stated on foreign affairs, global affairs website.
Yeah. So just a question now, in terms of the Green Party, there's someone particularly open in the Palestinian support for Palestinian rights, Dimitri Lascaris. So I'm wondering, just in general with the Green Party, would there be any considerations of, say, getting involved in potentially supporting a candidate or multiple candidates within that race if they're in support of Palestinian rights?
In terms of the coalition itself, I mean, that's not a conversation that we've had, but most of us would be working very closely with Dimitri at many different levels, and certainly work very closely with Dimitri. I guess it's getting close to 4 years ago when the resolution was, taken through the policy for the Green Party at the time that I spoke to earlier. And of course, it was Dimitri, along with a couple of other individuals and Independent Jewish Voices and another group, CJPME, that actually did the ECOS poll in 2017, I believe, so 3 years ago, that showed 70% of Canadians actually do support sanctions. So, I mean, we work closely with Dimitri on many things, I think would be fair to say, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, and so I just wanted to ask specifically around BDS Quebec was mentioned earlier. Could someone maybe speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, BDS Quebec has been. It's obviously we're active within Quebec, but we also work. We are part of the Canadian BDS Coalition, the larger pan-Canadian coalition. But within Quebec itself, we've had several campaigns. We've worked along with the Canadian BDS Coalition on trying to get Celine Dion not to perform in Israel. We were present in front of two of her performances at the Bell Center a couple of months ago, and obviously we support the signatures on the petitions asking her not to perform in Israel, which is an apartheid state. We have won a campaign whereby Hydro-Quebec, which had a partnership with Israel Electric Corporation on cyber security. And our campaign incited Hydro-Quebec to not to renew its contract. So its contract with Israel Electric is over. We had, in the last two federal elections, by the way, you might find this interesting, and this is a possibility not only for our organization, but for any organization or individual in Canada who would wish to run in a federal election, either as a third party, unincorporated organization, or an individual citizen can do it as well. But we have been involved in two federal elections on a campaign of recognition of Palestinian rights and the denunciation of Canadian policy. And as a matter of fact, in 2015, we took the city of Montreal, the former administration of Mayor Denis Coderre in the past, he's no longer there. We took them to court because they had torn down our posters. And we did win that in court. As a matter of fact, in 2019, the case was heard at the Quebec Superior Court in January of 2019. And the ruling came several months later, and the city of Montreal had to award BDS Quebec $12,000 in damages. But the more important aspect of that is that it sets a legal precedent And that was the important part. Right now, we are organizing for a campaign against Israel Cycling Academy. And that is a cycling academy which has been put together by a Montreal, well, he made his money in Montreal. He's a billionaire. His name is Sylvain Adam, and he now lives in Israel. And they've been organizing a cycling team to present itself at two cycling events in Quebec City and Montreal on September 11th and the 13th, and we intend to organize against that. And as a matter of fact, Israel Cycling Academy has actually purchased a French cycling team, which was on the point of bankruptcy, and they intend to present that team as an Israel team in the Tour de France. So we are also in contact with BDS groups in France, and we hope that they will also get involved in that. So these are, these are ongoing campaigns, and at the same time, we work with Canadian BDS Coalition so that we can collaborate on all of these campaigns, which are numerous, I think, and important. And I think one of the principal reasons that Israel goes out and attacks BDS with as much intensity as it does, because it's succeeding.
And the lessons, the kinds of things that we're able to do is like the win in terms of Israel Electric and Quebec Hydro. I mean, that's something we're mirroring across the country. So when you ask about other campaigns, there's work happening in other jurisdictions in the same regard where there would be similar relationships, or trying to determine if there are. So that's the kind of thing that we're able to do because we are connected together as well.
In terms of getting involved with the Canadian BDS Coalition, could you each maybe give some advice to people on how they could get involved, and whether that's, say, even supporting social media campaigns or actually trying to get involved in the organizations themselves?
I can start off if that's okay, and then Bruce and Hanna can jump in. So certainly any group that, an organization anywhere across the country that would support the full call of BDS, which would be ending the occupation, ending apartheid, and right of return, would be welcome to be in touch with us about joining with us and our efforts. They could do that at bdscoalition@gmail.com, or any of us individually. In terms of engaging in campaigns and the work of the coalition, certainly to check out our website, which is www.bdscoalition.ca. Subscribe so that they can follow events from that page, as well as we're probably most active, I think it would be fair to say, Hanna, on Facebook at our Canadian BDS Facebook page. And that way you can keep track of campaigns, because I mean, we also are supporting and working on all of the campaigns that come out of the BNC in Palestine. So we mentioned some of those, like HP, but last week there was Puma Round 3, Give Puma the Boot, and all kinds of other things, Airbnb and other information that we would be sharing around those kinds of campaigns, as well as the ones that we focused on more, which are the Canadian campaigns that we initiate here as well. And then just to keep appraised of what's going on, to know about when there's petitions going forward, when they know about the work we might be doing in regard to letter writing to the Canadian government. I mean, I think we've had close to 100 letters go around, individual letters beyond the organizations, regarding the Canada's stance related to the International Criminal Court. So those kinds of actions that come from some of our different groups, and many of those will come from BDS Quebec, CPA in Vancouver, Hanna, Canada Palestine Association, or from a group like mine, Just Peace Advocates. Some will come from the coalition. So it's a good way to keep linked in there. Hanna and Bruce, other ways?
The best way to support the BDS is to be part of it. To be part of an organization. If they don't have the time to be part of an organization, again, like Karen said, to follow up these activities and that across the country and support them, whether physically or by promoting them on Facebook or all sorts of other means of supporting these activities. And there's quite few now. It's with the coronavirus, not many events are taking place physically, but still the campaigns going on the internet and on Zoom and other means to follow up. So I think that's the best way, and follow the Facebook pages and groups and our websites.
All right, great. So now this question I'm curious about here. Now, maybe there's some people that aren't as familiar with Canadian BDS Movement, Israeli Apartheid. Would there be any book or maybe video content recommendations for people that would want to get informed on this issue?
So I take that, Hanna?
I think the best way is to check their website, the PNC website, from back home, and they have all the sorts of details, what they stand for. They have videos, they have all sorts of things on the BDS movement website.
And you might also want to check out a couple of Israeli human rights organizations. I'm thinking specifically of B'Tselem, which is a superb Israeli organization that is consistently harassed by the Netanyahu extreme right government. They might want to go on to B'Tselem, look at the maps that they have of the Israeli security matrix, and they will understand immediately, graphically, the degree to which Palestinians are absolutely in an open-air prison in the West Bank. And by the way, the excellent Israeli journalist Amira Haas, who has lived in Gaza, has referred to Gaza as a concentration camp, perhaps not a death camp in the type of Nazi death camp, but most certainly a concentration camp in which 2 million Palestinians are basically caged and have been so for 12 years under blockade in conditions that are absolutely horrific. There's a United Nations study that said that by 2020 Gaza would be unlivable, and with Israeli help, they're getting to the point of being in an unlivable society. So B'Tselem, also the Israeli organization Breaking the Silence, former Israeli Defense Forces of soldiers who have told it exactly what it is on the ground, and just the extent to which Palestinians are made to suffer. There are all kinds of. There's the electronic intifada, which is worth looking at. There's Mondo Weiss. There are a whole bunch of Palestinian.
There's a couple places there's really good summary of all the ones, Bruce, you're mentioning as well. And on many of our websites we have them, but Robert, the Zatoon.com has really an excellent a library if you go into resources on it. Zatoon, Z-A-T-O-U-N, the olive oil, Zatoon.com, or also on NAPCA70action.org, which is a website that was put together 2 years ago right now, and we're coming up to NAPCA Day right now again. And there's some wonderful summary of all the resources Bruce has just mentioned and many, many more that allow people to kind of come in, to see films, to see, to follow news through the local news, to follow various human rights groups in Palestine and the ones that Bruce has mentioned, of Israeli ones, as well as others.
You certainly won't get any truth about the Palestinian situation by watching the CBC, the CTV, or Global News. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate truth about our media landscape these days. Yeah, so now in a conclusion sense, now there's obviously many people who are coming into this may feel basically intimidated or feel like it's maybe something that's not possible. And so one of the things, the historical campaigns I think all of you know about is the South African fight against apartheid. And that was a victory for those anti-apartheid fighters. Now, what do you think are some historical lessons that could be taken from that struggle and be put, and that have or could be put into the BDS movement?
Well, it's really sanctions. I mean,
the whole BDS movement.
Go ahead, Hanna. Go ahead.
That's fine. Go ahead. Yeah, well,
I was just going to say,
Karen, go ahead.
I was just going to say sanctions are really, I mean, 3-4 years ago when the World Social Forum was held in Montreal, and people were there from the BNC and from others in Palestine. I mean, and at the time, you know, what was needed, it was sanctions. I mean, you know, education, boycott goes a long way with that, and certainly divestment, if you can make it work, if we can find ways to you know, divest, especially for those Canadian companies that are complicit, and all of those things were tactics within the South Africa. But in the end, it was really, you know, not going to the not being part of the Olympics, and sanctions, government sanctions. So that way of saying, that's what Palestinians were asking very clearly for even a number of years ago. But I defer to Hanna because he's been, yeah, I'm much newer to this.
Why don't you go ahead, Hanna? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole BDS movement, Palestinian BDS movement, is based on the South African BDS or boycott, the South African boycott movement. And really there is connection among the two struggles and other liberation struggles all over the world. So there is some differences really. According to South African activists, our BDS movement gained more momentum within fewer years than the BDS, the boycott movement in South Africa. The other main difference also is the South African regime didn't have a good, solid advocacy movement in Canada. They get the support of the government, the same way Israel is getting the support of the government and the media, but also adding to that, there is a really effective and active pro-Israel movement here. The Zionist organizations in Canada is not compared nearly to basically before, during the South African boycott, the only people to confront the movement was the ambassador in Ottawa, the South African ambassador, while now it's not just the Israeli embassy, but with a whole groups from the B'nai B'rith to CIJA to even the right-wing fascist and terrorist group like JDL are confronting our work and our activities. Although, you know, that's not stopping us, and it will never stop us because we know our cause is just.
And I think as well, one of the principal differences is that the South African apartheid regime could not hide its apartheid behind a manipulative version of anti-Semitism, which is what the definition that was set by the International Holocaust Remembrance Association has attempted to do by stigmatizing anyone, all and anyone who opposes Israel's occupation and Israel's apartheid regime are immediately deemed as being anti-Semitic. Well, I am a Jew myself, and I'm an anti-Zionist, and I do not equate Zionism with Judaism. It's quite the opposite. And at that point in time when politicians here developed the required moral character and intestinal fortitude to stand up to this type of bullying, which has nothing whatsoever to do with anti-Semitism, quite the opposite, actually. Zionists have actually traveled with anti-Semites from the very outset of the Zionist project. That's heavily documented. South Africa did not have that type of leverage that they could use. But there are cracks in the foundations. You can see it. And as a matter of fact, I might add this, that this is recent, I think maybe a year or two ago, that a majority of American Jews, aged from 18 to 34, are actually had basically no emotional attachment to Israel and were opposed to its occupation, illegal occupation of Palestinian territories. So basically, what you have is a right-wing elite that takes it upon itself to speak for all the Jews of the world, whereas most Jews, at least here in North America and elsewhere, are far more progressive and do not support Israel's aggressive policies towards the Palestinian people.
You know, I think you made some good points about the dangers, because obviously anti-Semitism is something that must be fought aggressively, but there is definitely extreme problems with equating opposition to apartheid against Palestine to anti-Semitism. I mean, even in the UK, basically Labour was torn to shreds by this. Multiple members were kicked out, and then you see even in Ontario, the Ford government introduced a bill that was trying to equate BDS support and challenging the laws and military actions of the Israeli government as anti-Semitism. So there's definitely that issue. However, I think that's all the time we have, but I want to thank you guys so much for coming on. It has been great to chat with you. Hopefully people have learned a lot from this, and I guess I would like to give you the chance just to make any final notes before we go.
Well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to do that, and just encourage people to check out our website at bdscoalition.ca and to learn as much as they can, and to if they want to know about joining into local groups across the country, we have contacts in pretty much every part of the country, and so we're glad to connect people in that regard.
I'd just like to say that as a final statement on my part is that justice cannot be denied forever. And the Palestinian people will find their justice, and it will be achieved within a one democratic state with equal rights for all people within it, be they Jew, Muslim, Christian, or atheist. That's inevitable, and one day we will call Benjamin Netanyahu one of the founding fathers of a one democratic state in Israel, Palestine.
Yeah, I just like to quote Nelson Mandela by saying what he said. Our freedom is not complete without the freedom of the Palestinian people. And I urge everyone to help us achieve our freedom. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. It was great to speak with you. And I'm going to include some of the links that they've put in the chat in the YouTube description so people can check that out and go support them if they want to. Anyways, thanks for the interview. It was great to talk with you all, and good luck in the campaign.